Hey, David, just a heads up that we think that these slides will actually only take about a half hour. So don't be surprised if it doesn't take a full hour. And then I think that Judge Fisher is planning to join later. Whitney might know more about that.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right.
Hi.
Let's get started. Hi. My name is David Trout. I'm a youth outreach coordinator for ISIS at Metro State University. So today we'll be talking about how to navigate paying for college. And to start off, I'll start with my little story. So pretty much how I pay for college, I just pretty much did pretty much all the basics for like students who got low income, which is using FAFSA, which is pretty much a assistance from the government to help you pay for college. Also, sometimes use scholarships to pay for my schooling. So for our first guest, I will uh, for our first guest, we will be with Kesha Tanabe, she is a bankruptcy attorney licensed in Minnesota, North Dakota, and New York. She is a graduate from St. Thomas University, London School of Economics, and Carzo School of Law. She started her career as an assistant attorney general in New York. Prior to her starting, prior to her starting her own firm, which was partnered with Mallison LLP and Margaret Baker Daniels. She also was a professor at bankruptcy at St. Thomas University of Law School and was appointed by the U.S. Trustees Program of the Department of Justice to serve as a business bankruptcy trustee in Region 12. She's also an active member of the bar as well as countless local organizations such as the Minnesota Asian Pacific American Bar Association and the Japanese American Citizens League. Over a decade, she received a super lawyers and top women lawyers that designation by her peers, which is attorneys who receive this highest point on totals and research. So thank you, Kesha, and take it away.
Thanks, David. And I'll just say one word about Carl. Carl is my dear friend and super awesome colleague. And Carl is an associate at Taft, a very good law firm in downtown Minneapolis. Um, Carl, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, David, for inviting me. We just want to talk before we lay a bunch of information on everybody about the student loan process and how you pay for college. We don't want you to lose sight of the big takeaway point, which is that going to school after high school is worth it. In my personal experience, Carl, I think you'd say the same thing. You know, if I think back, for example, to where I was in ninth grade, my best friend and I took all the same classes. We got all the same grades. One of us decided to go to cosmetology school, and she now owns her own business as a salon owner. I chose to go to law school. I now own my own business as a lawyer. I own a law firm, and that whatever you choose, the process of going on to acquire more skills, more training to learn how to do a specific thing, whatever you choose as your trade, as your craft. Uh, in my experience, having that career has been really the defining feature of my adult life. I'm so glad that I went to school. I'm so glad for the experiences that I have in my working life and all the benefits that it's given me along the way. So, our point in telling you everything about why to take seriously how you're going to pay for your training after high school is not to scare anybody or put anybody off, but just to say, do it carefully, do it smartly so that you can have the best options when you get done with whatever training you choose to do. So, I'm going to share some slides and share some information with everybody. Can you see my slides, guys? Great.
Yeah.
So if you plan to get any kind of education after high school, like I said, it doesn't matter if you want to go to cosmetology school or if you want to go to trade school or if you want to go to college. The real issue is, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to manage your expenses while you're not earning money? So I think it's interesting. I'm going to skip through some of these slides since we don't have a live audience today. A lot of times it's easy to think about, should I go to college because I'll earn more money? I think that's true. So if you look at the column on the right, you can see that people with a bachelor's degree earn more than people with a high school diploma. It almost doubles your income when you get, if you get done with a college degree versus just a high school diploma, you'll double your income. But I think the left-hand column is really worth mentioning too, that it not only gives you more upside, but it kind of protects you against the downside. You're less likely to be unemployed and not have an income as well. You see that the potential unemployment rate or the average unemployment rate for people with a high school diploma is 8%. And if you have a college degree, it's more like 2.8%. That's a really big difference. So not only will you have a better quality of life because you'll earn more income, but you're less likely to experience all the obvious downsides of having no income at all and being jobless or going through periods of joblessness if you have some kind of tangible skill. So bottom line is, you should go to school, you should get some kind of training, but you should think about how much it costs to get that training compared to how much money you're going to make. So you want to spend a smart amount of money in order to get that education and get that training. And this diagram here shows you kind of what the differences are in going to a private school versus a public school. So if you go to the U of M, for example, you're in the green circle. If you go to a private school like St. Thomas, you're here in the blue circle. The big caveat here is, I don't think you should shy away from applying to a variety of schools, because the sort of full price tuition is what's represented here in this diagram. But this doesn't factor in the different kinds of financial aid that you might get at different schools. So for example, I went to St. Thomas, which is technically in this blue ring here, but St. Thomas was very supportive of me as a student and helped me out a lot with my tuition, with my room, with my board, and books and things like that. So this is not the full picture. You unfortunately have to apply in order to find out what the real price would be for you specifically, when you find out not just what the college technically costs, but how much financial aid you're going to get from that specific school. So generically, this is the difference between what different types of schools cost. In real life, you got to apply, find out what they're going to charge you specifically to go to that school after financial aid is factored in. Wanted to show you this slide just to show you that, we were joking before the presentation that we're here because, I wish someone had told me these things before I went to school, and I hope that it will benefit other people. But 66 out of 100 people graduate with some form of debt, 66%. And of the people who have debt, 40% of them fall behind. So our point here today is that you need to be strategic about how you use debt when you think about taking out loans and applying to different schools and programs. Carl, you want to take it away?
Yep. So the next slide, why might people regret taking out student loans? So some recent surveys have shown that almost half, approximately 45% of people regret taking out student loans. And there are a number of reasons for that. For some people, it may be that they don't feel like they got a benefit from the student loans. Some people drop out of college and don't get a degree and don't feel like they get the benefits of the education. But even people who do finish their degree sometimes feel that the burdens of paying for a very large student loan repayment every month can be inhibiting. For some people, it may be equivalent to a second mortgage. And again, we're not saying that you shouldn't take out student loans, but you should be careful about it. Be careful about the amounts you take out and try to gauge the amount that you would be able to repay after you graduate. And we'll go into that in more detail in a little bit. We can go on to the next slide though. Student loans are not just easy money because you do actually have to pay them back at some point. And student loans have more protections than other kinds of loans. I think David told you that we're both bankruptcy attorneys, and student loans are not typically discharged in a bankruptcy case. They will survive a bankruptcy case and continue to be collectible for long after you graduate. But again, it's not about trying to scare you or saying that you shouldn't take out any loans, but just be careful and use good judgment. So next, so paying for college, here are some of the ways you can do it. Research ways to minimize cost. Try to find, for example, maybe if you can go to a local school, you can maybe continue to live with your parents while going to school and save on room and board. Work and save money now if you can. And I remember one of my work study jobs when I was in college, I helped to coordinate the wait staff for college events. And one of the benefits of that work study job was that I got a free meal plan. So that's one other way to research ways to minimize costs. Once you get to the school, try to find out ways where you can save costs and maximize grants and scholarships. And there are all kinds of ways to find grants and scholarships, even if you don't have straight A's. And we'll look at that a little bit more later. And then last, after you've exhausted all the other options, look at loans to bridge the gap. But again, be careful, look at student loans as the last resort because the student loans may continue to be part of your life for a long time after you graduate. So what are some of the ways to make college less expensive? Well, choose a less expensive option, and that may not necessarily, as Kesha said, it may not necessarily mean a public or in-state option. It could, in some cases, be a private school. The college I went to was a private school with very, it's actually most years either the first or the second most expensive school in the country, Sarah Lawrence College in New York. But the sticker price was what was paid by the children of movie stars and rock stars. And they helped to subsidize people like me who came from lower middle class families. So it may be that a private school in some cases may be the less expensive option. But in-state may also be helpful because, as I said, if it's close enough, you may be able to continue living with your parents. And nobody really wants to live with their parents in college, but it can be a way to save money. You can start at a lower cost school and transfer. And one of the great things about, say, Normandale Community College down in Bloomington, those community college credits are a lot cheaper than the University of Minnesota, but they transfer perfectly well and are fully equivalent to the same classes and credits as at the University of Minnesota, but at a fraction of the cost. Maximize full-time status. So at a lot of schools, once you hit full-time, maybe full-time is 12 credits, anything above that minimum threshold for full-time is part of the same tuition. So if you're part-time, you may end up paying per credit, but once you're there full-time, it could be 12 credits or 18 credits in one semester. It's the same cost. So if you take as many classes as possible at the same time, you can maybe graduate early, maybe a semester early, and save a semester of costs. Reduce living expenses. So again, maybe just suck it up and live with your parents, get a lot of roommates, do whatever you can to reduce your costs and avoid high cost supplies. You don't need the absolute newest gaming laptop. Something that for most people, all you really need is word processing or spreadsheets, and you don't need the most expensive computer, for example, to get through college.
Hey, Carl, can I interrupt you?
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
say that, or just chime in that I completely agree with you. And, when we'll sort of date ourselves a little bit, but when you think about what the apartments around most college campuses in the Twin Cities looked like when you and I were going into undergrad versus what they look like now, you know, I think that there is now an increased temptation for students to live in really quite expensive accommodation, and to maybe have some, that the student loans can be used to subsidize your housing, whether your housing is an inexpensive dorm room or um, a really great new apartment building. And so unfortunately, if you choose to use your money to live in a nicer place before you actually have an income, that's really going to affect your options a couple of years down the line. So, for example, if you choose to go on to graduate school, once you start getting into the fourth or fifth or sixth year that you've been in college, you might start to encounter some problems if you spent a lot of money right away on things that you could have avoided. It will constrain your options. You will have to pay more money to borrow, amounts beyond, say, 100,000 or whatnot. And that starts to be an issue for people who want to go to, say, law school, dental school, medical school, vet school, etc. If you know you're going to be in school for a long time, this is super relevant to you. Carl, I think, what were you in school, like maybe 7 years, and after high school?
More than that.
8 years?
So I think 10 years because I have a master's degree also.
So me too. So I got a master's before I got a law degree. And so I was in school more like 9 or 10 years. So that's 9 or 10 years that you don't have an income, that you don't have a job. So you can't live like, my parents used to call it premature affluence, that you're not successful till you're successful. You can't spend money like you have a successful career until you actually have that career, or it will come back to haunt you. So you have to resist the urge to take out those credit cards they offer you, or to take out that expensive leases and apartments that are nicer than you really need.
Great points. Great points. So working and saving, I don't think this needs much explanation. Just the more you can work and earn money now to keep your costs down or to keep your debt down and to pay for things as you go, the better. The fewer student loans you need to take out, and the more you'll be able to keep your future student loan payments low. And Yeah, go ahead.
Carl, I feel a little bit critical of this part of the materials. So it's not directed to you, but so sort of to the formal official materials that, the ability to work and save might be directly related to what kind of circumstances you have growing up. And I know you get this, so I'm just saying this kind of for the broader audience that this may be realistic for you and it may not be realistic for you. So if your parents are wealthy enough that they can pay for your housing, they're paying for your schooling, they're paying for you to travel, they're paying for you to sign up for extracurricular things, then you might have the luxury of working and saving all of your money. But for children who are not, that don't have rich parents, the reality is that if they're working, they might have to use that money to buy clothes or to buy for ordinary things along the way, like you might. So I think the reality is that only like 10% of people are able to work as middle school kids, high school kids, in order to save up enough money to really make a difference when you go to college. I would say that the thing you can do that helps you more is to not escalate your lifestyle once you have access to student loans. Don't start spending your student loans to eat out and live in a fancy place and things like that. So my
Yeah,
2 cents.
absolutely. And so maximizing scholarships and grants, which is important because of course scholarships and grants are actually free money, unlike loans, which have to be paid back. And the first step to maximizing your scholarships and grants is to complete your free application for financial student aid every year, the FAFSA, which is the next slide. And these federal Pell Grants could be worth $23,000 if you qualify for them as free money that you don't have to pay back. And then the 2 slides later, let's just skip ahead a little bit to slide 15. Keep in mind that there are people at your high school who are paid to help you apply for college, and guidance counselors, and to help you find ways to pay for college. You just need to ask. And maximizing scholarships and grants. So here are just, again, you don't need to necessarily be a straight A student. There are all kinds of crazy scholarships and grants out there if you just know to look for them, for things like being tall, for being a redhead, for for making a prom dress out of duct tape and showing and sending in a picture and being picked. And a lot of these more exotic or unusual scholarships may be easier to get just because a lot of people don't know about them. You have to really go out and hunt and find out the information. And so there may be a small applicant pool. And again, it's not based on grades in some of these cases, but just based on being a redhead or sending in the best picture of your prom dress made out of duct tape. So
it's
be
a
creative.
good point, girl. It's like if you're a member of a club or if your parents work for a certain company, or, look at whatever your circumstances are and see if there's any one of these kinds of things that apply to you. I personally am a member of the Japanese American Citizens League, and I remember receiving a grant from them that I used to get my first computer, and so even if it's a couple $1,000, if it gets you a computer in college, it's great. And it's going to be a huge part of how you get through college. So sounds silly, but I think it's really worth looking for.
Absolutely. So now we can start talking about the main topic of today, student loans as the last resort.
Great. So, but just keep saying this. We're not trying to scare anyone out of getting student loans. We're really just saying that you have to use them sparingly, that you use them after you've explored all the other options first. And I've kind of harped on this point, but you will get advertising, you will get things in the mail. People who loan money, whether they are credit card companies or student loan companies, will make the money seem easier and very available. And just because it's offered to you doesn't mean you need to take it. So you should always take the money with the idea of repayment in mind. So for example, I think this is a really helpful slide, that if you borrow $10,000 and you pay it back over 10 years at 6%, you're going to pay back, it's the middle option B, you will pay back $110 a month over 10 years for a total of $13,000. I think this slide is intended to be simple, but if you graduate with, say, $50,000 a month or $50,000 total of student loans, and you have to pay back something more like $550 a month, that gives you a sense of kind of how real the repayment will feel. It'll feel like a car payment, or like, worst case scenario, it'll feel like having 2 house payments when you get out into the workforce. And it won't feel that way for just a year or two. It's usually 10 years, or some loans are set over 30 years. So our point is, borrow very carefully, borrow what you need, but don't borrow so much that you change your life for 10 to 30 years after you graduate. So after talking about how serious student loans are, I think you'll be unsurprised that a pair of lawyers are telling you, don't sign anything you don't understand. Don't be embarrassed about asking for information. Make sure you know really, basic things like, is there a flat fee that you have to pay at the time that you take out the loan, that's to like process or administer your fee, that's money you have to repay, but money that you're not going to receive to use for your tuition or your living expenses. If those fees are really high, you're going to want to skip those loans. Some loans require cosigners and some don't. And again, depending on your life circumstances, that may be a deal breaker for you. Your parents may not be in a position where they can do that for you. Interest rates are really important, because this is going to affect how hard it is for you to repay your loans. You will be surprised at how wildly the interest rate for student loans can vary. Some student loans have interest rates that are 1% or 3%, almost nothing. And I've seen student loans that look kind of like credit cards, where they're, 10% or 9%. You don't want to take out anything like that unless you're really sure you can pay those off very quickly and you really absolutely need that money. Default provisions are also really important. If you come from a kind of family background where, if you go through a period of unemployment, that you're not going to have wealthy parents to fall back on who might pay your rent for a while or let you live at their house, you're going to want to know how you can manage your student loan repayment obligations if you fall on hard times after you graduate. So all of these things are very important for you to understand how the student loan will affect you after you graduate. So our broken record point, don't not go to school, but borrow really carefully, borrow wisely. I think it's really important to note that generally speaking, federal loans are almost always better than private loans. They almost always have a better interest rate, and they almost always have a better deferral system while you're in school, or if you go through a period of hardship after you graduate. Um, and they almost always have a longer repayment term, which lowers the monthly payment for you and makes it more affordable after you
So,
get out of school.
and of course, even among federal loans, though, there's a difference between subsidized and unsubsidized. And
That,
if you have the choice, go for the subsidized first, because what subsidized means is that the government pays the interest while you're in school or in deferment.
that is so critical because you don't want to be going in the hole while you're in school, while you're unemployed. That is makes it just significantly harder to repay your loans. I agree completely, Carl. And I think the other thing that's not written here, but federal loans are almost always easier to consolidate. It's very difficult to consolidate. I think it's actually impossible if you have a mixture of federal and private. I don't think you can consolidate your private loans at all. And consolidation is really important when you get out and are actually repaying your student loans. Having a single payment that's as low as possible is the goal of consolidation. And that's almost always beneficial and almost always possible with federal loans.
I think it's possible if you have a mixture, but if you consolidate both federal and private, you may lose some of the advantages of the federal loans.
The
You may
blended
lose
rate.
you may lose the lower interest rate. You may lose the subsidy of interest during deferment, and also it's a sad thing to discuss, but most federal loans, I believe, are discharged if you die, so your family isn't on the hook for it, and that would be a benefit that you also lose if you consolidate federal and private loans.
That's very real, Carl. I had a life insurance policy that would pay off my student loans if I died, so that my parents didn't have to pay my student loans back if I died prematurely after I get done with law school. Morbid but serious thoughts. So there are really just so many benefits to public. So take public anytime you can. And to Carl's point, take subsidized public loans anytime you can. Private student loans, absolute last resort, almost always higher interest rates and almost always have stricter terms. I would say the only private loans that I took out were when I chose to go to law school, because I had been not working and had been in school a long time. I had at that point accumulated a fair amount of student loan debt, and you might have to look to private student loans toward the end of a very long period of being in graduate school, because you may sort of max out and no longer qualify. And so, like I said before, if you choose those and you use those as a last resort, then when I graduated, I immediately very aggressively paid those off first. So if you take them, use them really sparingly and get rid of them as fast as you can. So this is, I think, the most important slide we've got, Carl. Why don't you take this one?
Yep. So when you graduate, try to arrange so that your total amount is less than your expected salary. And that raises the big question of what is your expected salary? We all kind of think we'll make a lot of money after we graduate, and it's not always true. So try to be realistic, and think of, and maybe do some research. Try to find out, if your expected career is computer programming, you can find resources online to find average or median starting salaries, which will be different depending on the industry.
That's a fantastic point,
Yeah.
Carl, that if you have a sense of what you want to go into, if you have a sense of where you want to live, you can use the internet to find out what the expected earnings are for a person in that field in the area where you want to live. And that will help you to gauge whether the quantity of student loans you're taking is appropriate, is in line with the type of training that you're doing. But I
Yeah.
see that Judge Fisher is here and we're at the end of our presentation. So perhaps we should introduce Judge Fisher.
Yes.
Well,
Well,
Good afternoon.
hi,
Judge. Hi. We've,
hi.
we've just finished talking through the slide deck about all the different types of loans. So thanks for joining us, Judge Fisher.
Well, thanks for having me, Ms. Tanabe and Mr. Johnson. Thank you for doing this as well. I'm happy, those of you watching this, I'm happy you were able to join us. I'm here for to tell you a little bit about what goes on in the court that I'm in, but also how the student loan issues that you've just heard about are affected by that. Now, I'm wearing this robe that I don't normally wear, only when people are in the courtroom, but I'm wearing it to show you what it'd be like if you had to come before me someday. And I'd love to meet you all, but probably not in this courtroom unless you're visiting, because what I deal with are people and businesses that have trouble paying their debts and they have to file for bankruptcy. I'm in a federal courthouse. I'm a federal judge. And bankruptcy is federal, U.S. Congress law. And prior to that, I was a Hennepin County judge where I did all criminal work. And prior to that, I was in private practice, doing things similar to Ms. Tanabe and Mr. Johnson. So you've learned a little bit about student loans and bankruptcy. The purpose of bankruptcy is to have people who can no longer pay their debts, not have to spend the rest of their lives trying to pay back all of their debts. And so our federal government's decided that it's better to have people not have to pay those debts and be able to get discharged, meaning get off of those debts, in essence, not having to pay them. Now, there's a trade-off. You have to turn over everything you own that you're not allowed to keep. And you're allowed to keep, in most cases, your home, and in most cases, your car, and in most cases, even some of your savings for retirement, but not a lot else. Your clothes and your furniture, but not a lot else. So there's that trade-off. Now, most debts you can get rid of in bankruptcy. You can't get rid of your mortgage. You can't get rid of certain kinds of debts. It's hard to get out of taxes. You can get out of them in some circumstances, but it's difficult to get out of taxes completely. And student loans. Student loans are difficult to get rid of in bankruptcy. And what that means is that if you have a large student loan debt or debts, plural, you're going to be stuck with them the rest of your life. Now, there are exceptions, and you can get out of student loans if a judge like me finds that those debts are an undue hardship. And what that means, it's kind of up to the circumstances of each case. And so you got to convince me that it's an undue hardship, not just a hardship, but an undue hardship. Maybe you're disabled. Maybe there are other issues that have arisen that make it impossible for you to ever begin paying those debts. But the point I'm making is that it's very difficult to get right now. It's very difficult to get out of student loans. There are programs that you can go into to maybe spread them out over even a longer period of time, or maybe there are programs that tie your debts into what your income is, so you're paying what you can afford, but not allowing a lot of extra money to go on vacations and things like that. It's what you can afford based on your income, meaning most of your, we know you got to live, but you also, what you don't need for living should be going to pay those debts. And I'm simplifying, of course, but the point of this is that student loans are difficult to get rid of. So the kinds of things that Ms. Tanabe and Mr. Johnson have told you today are important things to remember as you consider college. And I know they've told you that when you go to college and post-college things, you can make a lot more money in life if you are able to do that and get a college degree. So it's very important to get that. And you may have to incur some debt, as they've told you. It may be impossible to avoid incurring some debt. But as they've told you, there's debt and then there's lots of debt. And so you want to be in that low category. You want to be in that category where the debt is manageable, and someday you can see yourself paying off that debt. And they've told you that, when you go to college, the things you want to think about is what kind of college you go to, how much money you can get, as they've told you that already. Also, I'm sure they've told you what your career is important to think about that, because I was a history major, for example, and a lot of fun reading about history. But, and when I was younger, a lot of businesses would hire history majors. They didn't require a finance degree, maybe, but these days it may be a little harder. And I'm not being critical of that. If you want to be a history teacher, for example, that's great. But there are other jobs you can still love history, for example, and maybe enjoy economics, because there's a lot of history involved in that. And study history, but also study economics. Maybe that degree will get you more jobs. You can pay off those better paying jobs. You can pay off that student loan. So those are things you need to think about and talk to your counselors, your parents, other advisors. Look online too. It's amazing how much information is actually online. And that way you can keep those student loans to a level where you aren't going to have to see me someday saying, please let me off these student loans. I can't pay them back. And I can tell you some stories of cases that are public records. I'm not telling any inside information, but, people have gotten degrees in things that didn't have jobs. And so they had made it harder they had to come to me and say, it's an undue hardship to pay back $200,000. I'm not making the number up. $200,000 in loans. I can't do it. And my degree, I can't find a job. Well, that puts you in a tough situation in life. It makes it harder for you to ever buy a house, harder for you to do things that are fun, harder for you to give money to charity and do charitable things. It just makes it harder to do things in life with that kind of a debt looming over your head. And so you want to think about going to college or some post-high school training to get a good job, whichever that might be. But you also want to think about what kind of job you're going to get. And if you are getting loans, and Mr. Johnson and Ms. Tanabe have told you various ways to think of, you don't have to get loans. There are some, they've told you about avenues where you can get scholarships or stipends, and other ways of getting money that you don't have to pay back. It's money for you to spend on school that's yours. And they've also told you about ways you can go to schools that don't charge as much. And still get a degree. One of the people that appeared before me, for example, started out at an expensive school, but switched and went to a community college and then graduated from Minnesota. So they had ultimately ended up getting a degree with 2 years of community college, very cheap, and then 2 years at the University of Minnesota. Their degree says University of Minnesota on it. And nonetheless, they paid a lot less than a lot of other people did. So these are the kinds of things you want to think about. A lot of people don't want to go to school in Minnesota because they lived here their whole lives, and it's finally time to move out of the state and see the rest of the country, or get a new experience. Well, our state has reciprocity with our states. Maybe they told you about that. And you can go to a Wisconsin school or North Dakota school for the same price you'd pay in Minnesota. So that's, again, something to think about, that doesn't necessarily keep you here in Minnesota if you want to have an experience somewhere else and not see me. I can also, let me also talk a little bit about getting, it's not just school that's the problem, and it's other debts it's not just school debts. And when you're in school, some students will find themselves getting credit cards, for example. And that sounds great, and you can borrow money, you can take a fun trip during spring break. The problem is those have very high interest rates. I'm sure they've told you interest rates, the interest adds up. That's the money you're paying so you can borrow the money. That really adds up. And Mr. Johnson and Ms. Tanabe see people all the time who have gotten themselves into trouble on credit cards. Maybe because they had a job and thought they could pay those credit cards, and then they lose their job for a couple of months and fall behind, and maybe they get a new job and things are going better, but they still got these credit cards they can't pay back. They're just making a few, making a small payment each month, and the debt keeps going up and up. But those you potentially can get rid of in bankruptcy. But the problem is then people look at you as someone who doesn't pay back their debts, and it gets harder to get other loans that you may really need in life, like a mortgage to buy a house, a car loan, or you can get those loans, but you're paying a lot more for those loans than somebody who didn't run up their credit cards. So these are things that you want to think about in life. Student loans are outside of mortgage, which is always going to be a big loan because houses are very expensive. So that's going to be a big loan. And your car loan isn't typically all that big if you're not getting yourself a fancy car. But student loans are the biggest other problem people have. And so listening to what Dave told you avoids you having to see me with this robe on. I'd like to see you without this robe on and hear how well you're doing in school, and or maybe you'd visit, and anyone's welcome to visit me, especially starting when we have people coming into the courtrooms again, maybe in June or so. Any one of you is willing to come. Anyone watching this can make an arrangement to come visit. I'd love to see you and talk to you about careers in the law, for example. Not just lawyer, but there are a lot of other jobs in the law that are very interesting jobs that you might be interested in. I'd like to talk to you about those things and hopefully never see you as somebody who's asking to get off of their student loans because they've gotten so high and it's so difficult. And Congress has told me I can't do it. I can't do it that easily. And you can, and the other thing you can't count on is the law changing. The last time I spoke, I got some questions about that. Well, wait a minute, isn't the president going to say nobody has to pay their student loans back? Well, he may say, he may do something. He may give some relief, but that's to people who have student loans right now. I don't know if the president in 4 years is going to do the same thing. How much he's going to say, let's say it's $10,000 off of your student loans. If you got $200,000 or $100,000 in student loans out there, that $10,000, it's great to get that relief, but it's you still got a big problem. If you have a small amount of student loan debt and the president says you're off of $10,000 of it, then you might be finished. So that's another reason you don't count on getting that free money someday from the president. Could happen, but it's nothing you can count on, and you don't know who the president's going to be or what the thinking is going to be when you graduate and have those student loans. Could be good, could not, might not be good. And you just have to assume it's going to be bad, and you don't want those student loans if you can avoid them. Now, I know we're not, normally I would take questions about anything, about my job or about any of that kind of thing. But I also understand that this is not necessarily live for everybody out there. So I know there aren't going to be student loans questions for me, but what I'll do is I'll answer some I've gotten in the past, and I'm assuming some of those are out there. And I know one of them is, why shouldn't I max out what I borrow for schools? After all, if I can get money on student loans, I might be able to go to a better school than one that doesn't. In other words, I might get to a better, so-called better school if I can get some student loans, but maybe as opposed to a school that maybe is not ranked as highly without the student loan. So I get those kinds of questions, and what I tell people then is, well, you got to look at all that very carefully. First of all, again, what are you studying? What are you studying? That's an important question. Because if you're going for, again, an engineering degree, the sciences pay better than the non-sciences. But if you're in the non-sciences, and I'm not an expert in this, but there are plenty of things that pay well. If I mentioned finance and economics and real estate and a whole bunch of jobs in business schools. So you really want to think about that, and not so much the so-called reputation of a school. I think that is sometimes something you have to put aside and think strongly about, again, what it's going to cost you and what your degree is going to be in. Because if you get good grades and you're in an area that is highly sought after, you're going to be in much better shape than even if you went to a so-called better school, but you ended up with a large student loan debt. The other thing, as I mentioned, is, well, wait a minute, what about the idea of maybe starting at one school and finishing at another? We don't necessarily plan for that. But again, I mentioned the community college idea, and a lot of people have done this. 2 years at a community college, much less expensive, end up at another school, maybe with a more prestigious degree, like, for example, the University of Minnesota. So that's something else to think about. Schools like Metro State are excellent at any of the Minnesota State schools, Bemidji State, Metro State, Minnesota State at Mankato. Those excellent schools, and they charge less than University of Minnesota. And a lot of them have areas of great specialization where employers are looking for people from those schools that have some area of specialization. That goes for the ones in Wisconsin. There are a lot of Wisconsin schools, Wisconsin Eau Claire, Wisconsin River Falls. Again, we get reciprocity there. So those are other schools, and some of those have certain. So you want to look at what you're studying. Does it match up with the school? Those are things you want to talk about. The other thing is I get this question a lot when we talk on this topic. Wait a minute, my parents haven't gone to college. They don't, and it's, even if they have, this is also when they went to school was also uncomplicated. You know, they paid $500 a semester. You know, so they didn't worry about this kind of thing. And now look how things have changed. They don't know what's going on, and I don't. My school doesn't always have the counseling that I need. There are nonprofits. My niece worked for one, for example, here in Minnesota. There are nonprofits that get money from charities and from foundations that are designed to help guide you through this process. I won't give names, but again, if you Google that, and always look for, by the way, when you're Googling things, there are some places out there trying to make money off of you. Be careful of those. I'm not saying they're bad, but be careful with a .com versus a .org. That's not a complete rule of thumb, but .coms are for profit, .orgs may not be or shouldn't be. Again, that doesn't mean the .com's bad or anything like that, but look carefully at some there. But there are places that will give you free advice, and so research that and look for those places that can help advise you. And they are very wary of the student loan situation, so they're aware of it. They're also aware of the things that Mr. Johnson and Ms. Tanabe have told you. They're very aware of how to get you money that is not that are not loans. And a lot of schools have a lot of money to give away. And a lot of those schools are looking for people to give them to that are qualified to get them. In other words, do well in high school, but also maybe you don't have a lot of money saved up. And they're looking for people like that. And, you know, we know of schools that have a lot of money to give away. Some of the most famous schools have a lot of money to give away. Harvard, places like that. A lot of private schools. And so those are things you always want to think about. But I think what they have told you today is very important. And no matter what grade you're in, if you're in the 9th grade or the 8th grade or whatever grade you're in, you want to start thinking about these things now. Again, it's very important to go to post-college. I think that for you to be able to make a living that you can live on, whether that be it could be a 2-year program or it could be a 4-year program, whichever it is. You want to think about that, but you also want to start thinking about how you're going to pay for that. And so you can, even in 9th grade, it's something worth thinking about. First of all, you can work and save some money up, but also you start thinking about those kinds of things we've talked about that you've heard about, scholarships, all those things that are out there. And then you won't have to see somebody like me wearing one of these things and be trying to trying your best to get off of those loans. You won't have that problem. Now, a lot of people who see me can't help it. They're here because they had medical problems and they couldn't pay bills. Nobody can help those things. And so a lot of people are here due to unfortunate circumstances, but some are here because they thought a little bit bigger about borrowing money than maybe they should have, and learned that the hard way. So if you start thinking now about that and strategically about that, you're less likely to see me someday. And again, I want to see you all. You're all welcome. Anybody watching this can call 651-848-1060, 651-848-1060 if you want to arrange to come and visit, either by Zoom or in person if it's safe to do so. Probably will be this summer, I'm hoping. We'd love to have you. We'd love to see you and show you around and talk to you about legal careers. So I don't have much else. I know we're running up against, I think, the last minute here. But that's all I have. But it's nice of you all to see this. And again, I thank Mr. Johnson and Ms. Tanabe for giving up some of their very important time today to talk to you and to teach you a little bit about ways to avoid those big student loan problems.
Awesome. Thank you both. And thank you all so much. That was awesome. My dog just woke up from a nap.
Well, was she
we-
napping? Because I hope it wasn't that boring. Is that why I put her to sleep?
No, no, not at all. You-
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, David.
All right.
No
Thank you,
problem.
Dr. Chair.
Thank you all very much. Have a nice
Bye.
weekend. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.